Hey everybody, I'm William Green and welcome to my plant tour of the Conservatory of Flowers at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, California. This is North America's oldest public glass and wood greenhouse, and it opened its doors to the public in 1879 according to the brochure. I visited the conservatory on a cold and gray, foggy San Francisco day, but it was still very warm and nice inside the greenhouse. I was lucky enough to be right on time for a free tour that was given by a volunteer docent by the name of Drew, and he was so knowledgeable. He pointed so many things out that I would have never caught. I really want to thank him for the fantastic tour. A beautiful wall of plants is the first thing that greets you when you enter the conservatory. The first major display that you encounter is the Lowland Tropics Room, and this is the dome of the conservatory, so it's the tallest room. In addition to the impressive palm trees on display, this room houses a 100-year-old philodendron speciosum with 6-foot-long leaves. Apparently it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in cultivation. This cycad is an example of an ancient plant that has been around since 200 million years ago. It's possible that dinosaurs ate plants like this. This plant is a female, and these are the reproductive parts waiting to receive the pollen of a male plant, but unfortunately there's no male plants around. Moving on from the hot tropical lowlands to the Highland Tropics, and these are cloud forest conditions. These are very humid and cool conditions, perfect for lots of orchids and other interesting plants. The conservatory's brochure has a pretty interesting statistic. They say 1 of every 10 flowering plants on Earth is an orchid. This room had a particularly nice selection of the Masdevallia and Dracula type orchids. Here's an example of a Masdevallia. These are somewhat difficult to grow for people like me who live in a very warm environment. You have to keep them cool all year round, and that can be quite a challenge. Now, our guide told us that these flowers are pollinated by fungus gnats, and because of that, the lip of the flower resembles a fungus. It looks like an oyster mushroom. It makes me smile because now that I look at it, sure, it's obviously taking that shape, but before I had absolutely no idea. The conservatory houses a very impressive collection of Nepenthes, or tropical pitcher plants, to accompany the blooming orchids and other flowers. Now moving on to the Aquatics Room. If I understood our guide correctly, this room's layout has changed very little since opening to the public over 100 years ago. Once again, to quote the brochure, in addition to aquatic plants, the gallery features a collection of carnivorous pitcher plants and a whole host of bromeliads. This is the fanged pitcher plant. You can see those 2 things hanging down from the top that look like teeth, and those secrete nectar which attract insects that will later fall into its mouth, its gaping mouth. And this plant has an interesting relationship with ants that protect it from predators while benefiting from the food that falls into the plant's trap. This is an example of the Nepenthes Flowers. And these are the pitchers before they form. Aren't they kind of a nice spirally shape? This wall had a nice clump of some of my favorite orchids, the bulbophyllums. These had circular bunches of tiny, impossibly intricate blooms. We also happened upon a very unusual variegated Nepenthes. Bulbophyllum echinolabium is the largest bulbophyllum with 16-inch plus flowers, enormous. This one's got a bloom spike that looks like it's had several flowers before and is pushing out yet another. Meanwhile, my plant at home puts out more leaves but never blooms. Here's another one of those spectacular pitcher plants. The conservatory had many different types, some that I'd never seen before. Our last stop on our tour of the conservatory is the potted plant room, and this specimen of Amorphophallus Titanum, one of the largest flowering plants in the world with a 10-foot tall inflorescence that smells like a rotting corpse. But this is not that flower. This is a cattleya, which is an orchid and smells much nicer. Here's another beautiful orchid. This is a bulbophyllum hybrid, but unfortunately this did not smell nice at all. In fact, it smelled like poop. In addition to the beautiful flowers, there were so many interesting shapes, such as the spirally tendril of this vine. I was also pleased to see this bulbophyllum allowed to climb up this post as it would in nature, illustrating how many orchids are in fact climbing plants. Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for joining me on my tour of the Conservatory of Flowers at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, California. Thanks again to our tour guide, Drew, who enriched our experience tenfold with his extensive knowledge of the plants and flowers in the conservatory. And thanks to everyone who works to preserve this national treasure. It is truly a plant lover's dream. Thank you for joining me. I'm William Green, and I'll see you next time right here on My Green Pets.